Mothers say that they would do anything for their kids. Marie Dean Arrington proved it. The criminal justice system is beyond broken, especially for minorities. Marie's son was on the receiving end of that injustice. In 1968, her baby boy was sentenced to life in prison for stealing $60 from a gas station. Understanding that this was egregious and unfair, Marie took matters in her own hands. Breaking into her son's public defender's office, she decided to exact revenge. He wasn't there, but his secretary was. Marie had no mercy. Revenge, Murder, and a Mother's Love. That's coming up on Ladies Love Crime. Marie Dean Arrington was about to cap off her criminal career in vicious fashion. She would seal her fate as the second woman to ever be on the FBI's most wanted list. Her infamous crime would reduce her to only 2 words: Mean Marie. Marie's son Lloyd got life in prison for stealing $60 in a gas station robbery. No one was injured. The other guy with him only got probation. Lloyd's sentence was unfair, and his mama Marie wasn't having it. She was taking justice into her own hands. The morning of the murder, Marie took a very public and erratic pattern. The day was April 22, 1968. Marie began her morning by driving to her boyfriend's place to borrow $1. That's the equivalent of $7.69 in today's money. After dropping off her 2-year-old son, Marie took a cab to City Hall. Afterwards, she went to get a miniature whiskey and a Coke. Now she was off to her son's public defender, Mr. Pierce's office. It was locked. She then went over to P.B. Howe's law office. Using a different name and sob story, she claimed her son was in trouble, but she didn't think he was guilty. Too busy, Attorney Howe sent her away. What did Marie need now? A new look. Back to the store she went, this time picking up a pair of sunglasses. Upon returning to Pierce's office, she claims to have witnessed a disturbing scene. 2 men and a woman were holding a gun to the head of Pierce's secretary, June Ritter. The official story of what happened is a bit different from what Marie would have you believe. After finding out what happens to June, you too would think this could only be done by a mad mama. Marie had abducted June from her office. Police were immediately alerted. 6 days later, June's body was found. It was found near a sandy lake 5 miles north of Cassia. Her body was riddled with bullets in her neck and head. She was killed with a shotgun. There was evidence that June was tortured before her death. June had also been run over repeatedly by a car. More than 100 officers worked the investigation. The intensity is likely to have negatively influenced this investigation. Marie's mother gave conflicting accounts of what happened and what she knew, leading some to think the cops might have been pressuring witnesses. A description of the woman who abducted June fit career criminal Marie Dean Arrington. Police picked up Marie, although she denied being involved in June's murder. Instead, Marie first claimed she was fishing with her cousin on April 22nd. Only after her cousin rejected the alibi did Marie fess up to being in Mr. Pierce's office where June worked. Marie then set out on a road trip to an orange grove that was north of Claremont. Marie was accompanied by several people: Leesburg Police Department Captain Ralph Perry, Lake County Sheriff Willis McCall, and 5th Judicial District State Attorney's Office Special Investigator Keith Owens. On location, they found a nylon stocking and a shoe belonging to June. Marie said June and her were both abducted and brought to a remote orange grove. She described the abductor as a large colored woman. Marie said June was left in the orange grove. The abductors then drove Marie back to town, warning her not to say anything about what had happened. Police believed she was lying and arrested her on the spot for first-degree murder. The irony of this situation is officers would likely have never searched the orange grove, as June's car was more than 20 miles away on the north side of Leesburg. Did Marie really murder June Ritter, or is there more to the story? Let's take a look at the evidence that prosecutor Gordon Oldham Jr. used. His case was built on 2 things primarily. First, a sealed envelope hidden under Marie's bathtub, and secondly, eyewitnesses. First, the sealed envelope contained June's keys and a gold watch. It also held a borderline illiterate letter. Printed in pencil was the following message: "If you want to see Mrs. Ritter alive and get her back, call off Willie McCall's office and the FBI. Between your office and Troy Hall's, there are 3 boys we want freed in 2 weeks. You will be given their names at a later date. The 3 boys are to be given their freedom. At this time, you will be notified where to find Mrs. Ritter. If you do not follow as you were told, you will never see her alive. We will be in touch from time to time to let us know that you received this letter. Monday after paper are to say that your office receives a phone call saying that Miss Ritter is safe. That you can truthfully say because she is looking at everything that is being written. We'll be looking for Monday's paper. If it's not there Wednesday, you will receive the arm that was wearing this watch. So on until you have every part of her body piece by piece. Either she's really stupid or thought she could outsmart the police because she led officers right to this evidence. It single-handedly connected her to the crime. Marie said the letter and its contents were left on her bed by the men who abducted both her and June. Marie told Sheriff McCall, quote, I didn't open the letter. I just took it and I throwed it under the bathtub because I figured they was going to hurt me or something. Once knowed me, and they told me what they was going to do to me and my children. So I know they ain't going to let me live after I tell this. Police searched her home multiple times. On the fifth attempt, they discovered a second note inside a robe in her closet. This letter was meant for the wife of the judge who sentenced both Marie's son and her daughter for an unrelated crime. The letter said, quote, Mrs. Hall, in my right hand, I have a .38 caliber. With this gun, I have took the lives of 2 people. Do not be the third. Come with me and everything will be all right. Do not, and you get bullets right through the eyes. Prosecutor Oldham linked these letters to Marie during trial, saying that the misspellings prove she was the author. For example, she misspelled the word peace. Oldham says, even a non-handwriting expert could tell. She spelled it P-I-C-E, just like it was in the ransom note. Who in the hell would spell it that way twice? However, handwriting samples seem to tell a different story. Florida Department of Law Enforcement handwriting expert James H. Kelly found few similarities and a considerable amount of variation between the notes and Marie's handwriting. The police pressed further. Perhaps Marie had someone else write the letters. Investigators went on to collect handwriting samples from 16 of her relatives and friends. Everyone was cleared. It's assumed at this point that Marie is a criminal mastermind and expert forger, and they have a fairly decent story to back this up. In 1964, Marie stole $348 from her sister, Dorothy, by forging her signature. Dorothy told FBI agents, quote, Marie can imitate anybody. If she sees yours one time, she will imitate yours. When all was said and done, jurors never heard from handwriting analyst James H. Kelly and his doubts that Marie actually wrote the notes. Instead, they were led to believe that misspelling a word was enough to prove it was actually Marie. Now back to the second key piece of the prosecution's case. 3 witnesses were called to the stand. However, they all fell apart during the trial. Both Boyd Holt and Billy Shaw said they saw a colored woman with June and in her car. Yet at trial, Holt testified that he was certain he actually saw Marie. And Shaw testified she only caught a glimpse of the driver through the windshield while she drove by going 30 miles per hour. The third witness was Leesburg resident Edward Lanham. He originally claimed to have followed a Chevy driven by Marie, but at trial, Lanham testified that he refrained from telling the police for 4 days what he saw. He said he then just, quote, finally decided to tell police he saw Marie driving Ritter's car. So the witnesses and the handwritten note seem a bit weak. Surely there was other evidence that helped justify a guilty verdict, right? You'd be wrong. Officers never found one hair or fiber related to June on any of Marie's clothes, shoes, or wigs. The murder weapon was never found. Marie's fingerprints were nowhere to be found on June's car. In fact, out of the 10 clear fingerprints lifted from June's car, 3 were June's. The other 7 belonged to unknown individuals. Marie's polygraphs were also inconclusive. The stylus moves only slightly when Marie replies no when asked if she killed Mrs. Ritter. The defense called no witnesses. And finally, law enforcement was so careless that quite a bit of evidence was tossed out. Lake County Sheriff Willis V. McCall admitted under oath that he failed to inform Marie of her rights before questioning her. The judge ruled that McCall's testimony, evidence from the orange grove, and crime scene photos of the tire tracks could not be admitted. The blunder was so bad that Marie's attorney called him lack of recall McCall when speaking to reporters. Doesn't sound like these investigators had a clue about what to do. Can we really trust that all the other evidence they gathered was done correctly? Despite all this potentially exonerating evidence, the prosecution clung on to their wild guess about Marie's handwriting and their flaky witnesses. At trial, they also whipped out one more story to persuade jurors. Leesburg police officer Jimmy Hutton said at Judge Hall's home he found a slash screen door and human waste on the storage room floor. He also found a fingerprint on the judge's car that matched Marie's fingerprint. That must have worked. The jury spent only 2 hours and 48 minutes deliberating before coming back with a guilty verdict. Marie didn't show any emotion during this time. 44 years later, Marie was interviewed about the crime. She said, quote, "Only 4 people know for sure who really killed Mrs. Ritter. The person that did it, myself, Miss Ritter, and God above. So I could not care less how many polygraph experts believe that the test did on me show deception. If I killed June Ritter, I would say so. What have I got to lose?" At this point, Marie's heart was enlarged, her lungs had grown weak, and her kidneys were failing. She figures she'll drop dead before her parole hearing in 2041. So she says she might as well come clean with what happened, saying, quote, "Here's what went down. I went in the door, and the woman got up and closed the door. The other man was standing in front of Miss Ritter with the gun. Miss Ritter was standing there crying. She say, 'I don't know anything about it. Please, I don't know anything about it.' Now they took Miss Ritter off. There was the lady that was driving, the big fat lady with the green dress. There was Miss Ritter and one of the black men. In the back seat, there was me and the other 2 black men." She continues with the story, saying the kidnappers drove both her and June to the Orange Grove in South Lake County. "That was where Miss Ritter was killed. That is the first time I saw Joe Fairfax's car. The white car. Joe was there. Him and 2 other men, or 3 men. He got out, went to Miss Ritter and the other man that was standing there with Miss Ritter that was in the front seat. That's when it happened. He shot her. He shot her." For the first time in over 4 decades, Marie finally named a suspect. Marie said she would sometimes work for Fairfax. He was a well-known drug dealer in the Leesburg area. She says she was making a delivery for him on the day the abduction and murder took place. She was doing so in his Chevy, which was the same color, make, and model as June Ritter's car. So perhaps when people saw a woman in Ritter's car, it was actually Marie making a drug delivery. In 2012, Fairfax's daughter, Terry Charles, confirmed that Fairfax did own a white Chevrolet Impala, but not until 1972. She maintained her father's innocence in the crime, as he was murdered in the 80s. Who was telling the truth, Marie or Fairfax's daughter? Could Marie actually have been a victim along with Ritter? Was Marie wrongfully convicted of a crime she didn't commit? These questions should be easy to answer. There were over 4,200 pages of documents related to Marie's case. Fairfax's name was mentioned twice, yet it doesn't appear that he was ever questioned or investigated. Was she really guilty, or was it corruption? Shoddy police work? Lazy investigation? Racist? Maybe she didn't, maybe she did not. Perhaps it was a flimsy case based on circumstantial evidence, and Mean Marie fit the bill. Once you learn a little bit about her, you begin to see why everyone pegged her for it. Jury foreman Del Knott would go on to say years after the case that there was, quote, "no doubt in my mind she was guilty." Edward Lanham Jr. was a witness for the prosecution. He is quoted as saying, "Marie would do anything. She was a mess. Marie would threaten a lot of them on Pine Street. She was terrible. She didn't have any respect for anybody, as far as I could see." Other people referred to her as a murderess without a conscience, a bad seed, someone who came from a bad family, and a girl that ran with the boys. Even the public defender Bob Pierce was quick to point the finger at Marie, saying, quote, "I told them who did it right away. Witnesses said it was a Negro woman Mrs. Ritter left with, and there could only be one mean enough to do this." And it's no wonder people felt this way. There was a reason she was called Mean Marie. She had a long rap sheet. She was arrested for forgery in 1955, convicted of assault in 1956, convicted of larceny and robbery in 1957, convicted of passing worthless checks in 1961, arrested for larceny and vehicle theft in 1964, convicted of manslaughter after shooting her husband during an apartment in 1964. She was convicted but not locked up for the murder of her husband. Marie skipped town while waiting sentencing. Even when Marie was in prison, she was a handful. According to the State Department of Corrections, she would receive 61 violations for possessing weapons and drugs, lying to staff, battery, and inciting a riot. It's not right, but it's easy to see how the 5th Judicial Circuit State Attorney Gordon Oldham Jr. wasn't about to let Marie elude justice a second time. He was quoted as saying Marie was a, quote, "wild, cunning animal who will kill and laugh about it." Did she do it? That's for you to decide. One thing we know is Mean Marie was mad. Her son was a minor when he robbed a gas station attendant. He took $60. His co-defendant had a private attorney and only got probation. Lloyd got life in prison. He claimed he was never advised of his rights to a trial by jury. He said that his lawyer, Bob Pierce, accosted him and deluded him. He caved to pressure and pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of grand larceny. Lloyd also says he did not sign a written waiver. He even expressed remorse in court, saying, quote, "The only thing I can say, Your Honor, I'm sorry I did it, and I wish I hadn't." This was a cruel miscarriage of justice. It's enough to make any mother mad with rage, let alone a career criminal like Mean Marie. When the police picked up Marie, she had a note that demanded the release of her son. Maybe she did it. Maybe she was just planning to do it, and someone beat her to it. While in prison for the crime, Marie busted out of Lau Correctional Institution by cutting through a heavy window screen. Dubbed, quote, a master of disguise, her disappearance spurred a nationwide search. The FBI placed her on its 10 most wanted list, making her only the second woman to achieve the dubious honor. Finally, 2.5 years after she disappeared, she was arrested in New Orleans in 1971. She had been using a false name and working as a waitress in a drugstore restaurant. Mean Marie might want to rebrand herself as Lucky Marie. In 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court threw out several states' death penalty laws, including Florida's. She would now spend the rest of her life behind bars. We'll never know exactly what happened. Like Marie said, only her, God, June, and the abductors know. Unfortunately, Marie died in 2014, so whatever really did happen died when she did. Her infamous crime was labeled the crime of the century in Leesburg by Lake and Sumter Style magazine. Their special report replayed the events of April 22, 1968. The editor of the publication addressed the confusion surrounding the case in a letter. He has reviewed countless documents, notes, and files pertaining to the case. He offers some insight into how the story of Mean Marie, as told by law enforcement authorities, may not be the complete story. The following is an excerpt of that letter. A number of things don't add up, things the public never heard. The first thing that jumped out at me was Marie's conduct on the morning of the crime. She dressed up, dropped her daughter at Neighbors, took a taxi downtown, had a soda at McCory's, and called at the P.B. Howe law firm, where she talked to a secretary. She was practically screaming, look at me," on the way to kidnap June Ritter in broad daylight just before noon. Marie maintained she visited the public defender's office to discuss an appeal for her son, and that she walked into a kidnapping in progress. According to Marie, a heavy-set black woman and 2 or 3 men were demanding files on 2 boys from June Ritter. Preposterous, right? I thought so until I examined the aforementioned files. 3 people saw June Ritter with a Negro woman on April 22, 1968, but Boyd Holt described the abductor as 5 feet 4 inches tall, 115 to 120 pounds. Another witness said the mystery woman was 5 foot 3 inches, 150 to 160 pounds. And then we have Charles Cromer's description, 5 feet 8 inches, 200 pounds with fat arms. Marie said 5 foot 2 and weighed around 120. Did Cromer see Marie, or someone nearly twice as large, the heavy-set black woman? Of course, eyewitness descriptions are far from reliable. But Marie sure acted curiously if she was the murderer. She didn't skip town when she learned police were looking for her. She told police about a sealed envelope, which turned out to contain June Ritter's watch, keys, and a ransom note, and led them to it. For being a master criminal, Marie sure was dumb. Make no mistake about it, she was a master criminal, maybe even a murderer. I'm not 100% sure she pulled the trigger on April 22, 1968, but I believe she was involved in a kidnapping murder plot. Someone other than Marie may have gotten away with murder. We'll probably never know the whole truth. Marie most certainly took secrets to the grave. Marie's life of crime before the murder of June definitely cast her in a negative light. It likely helped her secure a guilty verdict and life sentence. But don't feel sorry for Marie. She wouldn't want your pity. She had a devil-may-care attitude about life. While in prison, she gave an interview to the Associated Press. She sat there, smoking a cigarette, and said, "I've never been afraid of the law. I always knew if I broke it, I would go to jail. I was willing to take that chance." So what can we learn from this? Don't ever talk to the cops. Ever. Marie probably thought she was helping out, but in reality, they used everything they found against her. Cops are not your friends. Just like the Miranda rights say, they will use your words against you. When you talk, you give them an inch, and they surely will take a mile, stealing the narrative from you and casting you as the villain to help close their case. Also, don't ever go with the abductor. If you find yourself in June's position and someone is coming to kidnap you, stay right there. If you go with them and let them take you to a remote area, your chances of survival are even more slim. And as always, make sure you carry a self-defense weapon if legal in your state, something that you can use to fight back with.